Well, my name is Tom. This is going to be my first attempt at making something called Goetta out of Cincinnati, where my wife and I, both born and raised, certainly enjoy this item for breakfast. It's a German sausage, if you want to think of it that way. Very prevalent on the west side of Cincinnati, also in the northern Kentucky area. Kind of the heritage is coming from some of the Germans that emigrated to this part of the country years ago, and this is how they created their breakfast item. And we're gonna just kind of go through some of the items that we need here now. So let me show you what we've got. First thing we've got is a pound of ground chuck, 80/20. Next we have 1 pound of ground sausage. This is just regular sausage. There's no seasoning in there. The next item we have is steel cut oats. The recipe calls for pin oats or steel cut oats. They're basically the same thing. Recipe calls for water. It's going to be 8 cups of water in a boiling pot. We have 3 cloves of garlic, 1 large yellow onion, 3 large bay leaves, 3 teaspoons of salt, a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of poultry seasoning, a teaspoon of sage, and the last item is a teaspoon of thyme. What we're going to do is we're going to be putting these items into a large crock pot. So I've got my 8 cups of water in the crock pot now, and I'm going to be adding to that once it's at a boil. I'm going to add, well, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my meat to the water first. I'm going to break it up. I'm going to bring it to a boil, and I'm going to let it boil for about a half an hour, 40 minutes or so. During that time, I'm going to be stirring frequently, and I'm going to be adding my onions, my spices, and all of these items into the boiling water with the meat. After that is finished, it's going to be time to add the steel cut oats. And this is going to be 2.5 cups of steel cut oats that goes into the water mixture, and should cook another hour and a half or so after that is what the recipe calls for. So let me get this started, and I'll be right back with you. All right, so we're back. So in the pot of boiling water, I added my ground chuck and pork. I then mixed it in cold water before obviously it was hot. I mixed by hand and broke apart all of the sausage and ground chuck. I then brought it to a boil, and then I added all of my onion, my whole yellow onion, and my 3 cloves of garlic, and then all of my dry ingredients. The thyme, the pepper, the poultry seasoning, salt, and so forth. This is going to continue to cook for approximately 30 minutes or so, so probably another 15 minutes for me. And once that is done, I am going to remove, and it's very important to remove the bay leaves out of this slurry before we add the 2.5 cups of the steel cut oats. And I will be right back to show you that in just a moment. Go ahead and cover the pot of slurry that is in here. I want to retain as much moisture as possible for the oats to then absorb. I don't want all of that steam to evaporate, at least just yet. So this was one tip I forgot to mention before. So next we're adding the steel cut oats, and again the recipe calls for 2.5 cups of the steel cut oats to go into the slurry. And here is what the slurry looks like. I've already removed the bay leaves to make it a little easier down the road. It's a little harder to find them when they're in this mix after the steel cut oats go in and absorb all this moisture. And we're going to let this stir, simmer, cook for the next 90 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stir probably every 15 minutes or so. I'm going to keep it covered as it's cooking, and I'm going to just judge toward the tail end of the cook time to see if I want to either leave the lid off and have some of this moisture start to evaporate, because you want it to be like a paste at the very end. And when it's finished, you should be able to basically stick your spoon in the middle of this mixture, and it should not move at all. And once we get to that consistency, then we're going to move the product into basically these muffin tins. So we've got 3 muffin tins. I'm going to line them with parchment paper. I'm going to fill them. I'm going to let them cool. And when they're cool to the touch, I'm going to refrigerate overnight, and then they should be ready to go in the morning. So we'll be right back, and I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. One of the things I forgot to mention is once the steel cut oats go in the pot with the meat and all the seasonings, I'm going to turn the temperature down. So I want it to simmer covered for 90 minutes. So it's now simmering, and the cook time again is going to be another 90 minutes from here. And again, stirring frequently every 15-20 minutes or so. I'm going to be back stirring just to make sure it's not burning on the bottom of the pot. And I'll be back after the next 90 minutes. Okay, so it's been about an hour into the cook with the pin oats and the meat and spices. I did move the pot to a smaller burner where I can control the temperature a little bit better. And about halfway through that, about a half hour in, I did remove the lid and try to get most of this moisture to start evaporating. This is still a little wet, but it does allow you to stick your spoon. It is not moving. So I believe we're real close. I'm going to let this go for another 20 minutes, and we're going to begin to put these in the tins, the bread tin molds, and we'll be back right after that to show you. Okay, so about that 20 minutes, 30 minutes has elapsed. We have our final product here. I'm going to be using a large ladle, and I'm going to be spooning it into my tins that I've got lined with parchment paper. Once I have these full, I am going to tap them relatively aggressively on the counters, basically drop them multiple times just to try to get the air out of the product. Once I have it finished there, I'm going to wrap, let them cool for half hour, maybe an hour, where I can actually then put them in the refrigerator. And again, from that point, they're going to sit overnight, and they'll be ready for consumption tomorrow morning. All right, so welcome back. So we've got our mixture of the Goetta now into the tins with the parchment paper lining. Again, we're going to let these cool half hour, and then we're going to wrap them and put cellophane over the top, and we're going to stick it in the refrigerator overnight, and we're going to get back to you tomorrow morning and show you what it looks like after it's had a chance to set overnight, and how we prepare the Goetta for breakfast tomorrow morning. Thanks. Well, good morning. So here's what our Goetta looks like after setting up in the refrigerator overnight. I just rolled it out onto parchment paper, and it just fell right out of the bread tin, and this is what it looks like. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut the Goetta this way, and we're going to make maybe ½ inch thick slices, and we're going to simply put it on our griddle, and we're going to fry it up with a little bit of butter. So we're going to butter each side of the slice of Goetta and grill it, and we'll let you know how it turns out. All right, everybody, this is how the Goetta is going to look after I've sliced it. Put butter on the griddle, and just laid out the individual slices like so. Again, 350, 375 on the griddle. The trick is not to flip these multiple times because they're so soft. So you want to flip them basically one time. All right, so this is how the Goetta looks after its first flip. So I ended up adding butter to the top of the uncooked side, and then flipped it over to make sure that it gets golden brown on that other side. We'll let you know how it turns out. All right, so it is late October. We did have snow, so hence the placemats with the snowman theme. But here's what the Goetta looks like. We flipped it one time, so it cooked on each side just once, and it's going to be somewhat chewy in the center, but it's going to be hot all the way through. So we'll let you know how it turns out. All right, everybody, just want to get back to you and let you know how the Goetta turned out. It was fantastic. Very simple to do, very easy to do, a little time involved, but not very difficult. I suggest you give it a try and let me know how it goes. Thanks.